Anyone else feel that way? All right. Let's get my Bible. Got a little behind schedule. I had to call Yakima County Road Service. They've actually been really good in the past. My one other experience where there was a nasty hole in our road. I mean, it was like half the road was gone, it felt like. And it was close to that. I'm not exaggerating. And they got right out like within days. And so Postal Service left a note saying we needed to fix our grade to the mailbox. And there was a good sized pothole right there. So I figured, well, call the county. And look, they said they'll run on out and take care of it. So there we go. We are in Matthew chapter 24. It is the Olivet Discourse. And so it's the conversation, discourse, that took place on the Mount of Olives, also known as Olivet. Today and tomorrow we'll continue through this. Wednesday, I may be driving during our normal scheduled time. And so I'm assuming I won't be able to do it Wednesday, and we'll see where we're at on Thursday. The other option is I just do it at some other time, but we'll see. I don't know what time works best for everyone. I've always thought about, I could do them earlier. I could do them later. Some people have work, and so doing them earlier is helpful. Other people love their beauty rest, and therefore they'd rather do it later. But chapter 24, verse 15. Don't forget to tag and invite your friends to come join along. They don't want to miss this. Therefore, Jesus says, what is it there for? We might need to back up a little bit. He was talking about all these different signs and these things going on. And if you want to go chronologically through the book of Revelation, I mentioned how verses 4 through 14 really parallel chapters 6 and 7 in the book of Revelation. The seal judgments and the 144,000. Verse 14 here in Matthew compared to chapter 7 and the 144,000. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, whoever reads this, let him understand, then those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to take anything out of the house. Let him who is in the field not go back and get his clothes. But woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing in those days. And pray that your flight may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great tribulation, such as not been since the beginning of the world until this time, no, nor ever shall be. I'll just pause there. So we need to kind of look at Daniel to understand all of this stuff. And really, there's stuff in Daniel's chapters 9, 10, 9, 11, and 12. Not 9, 10, 11, but 9, 11, and 12. And so I'm going to flip back to the book of Daniel. Because if we want to understand this, then we need to go back to the guy he was quoting. He said, you've read it in Daniel, so we need to make sure that we have read it in Daniel. So in Daniel chapter 9, a chapter that at least myself and some of my fellow Bible teachers, we love to go back to and look at the prophecies of, it mentions that he, in verse 27, Daniel 9:27, he shall confirm a covenant, make a treaty with many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week, he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate. Abomination, desolation. There you get those words. Even until the consummation, which is determined, is poured out on the desolate. So it says there's going to be a covenant for a week, which is a 7-year period. And I've taught that before in the past, but for a 7. The Hebrew word for week is the word 7. So he'll make a covenant for a 7. Literally what it says. And in the middle of that 7 is when he's going to bring an end to sacrifice and offering. So the temple's up and running. There are sacrifices and offerings being made. And in the middle, he cuts it off. Now, if we take a look at, let's see here, Daniel 11. I've got 31 written down here. And forces shall be mustered by him, and they shall defile the sanctuary fortress. They shall take away the daily sacrifices, and place there the abomination of desolation. So, it's interesting that in Daniel 11, what we get from 29, I'm quickly looking at this. Really, 29 onward, we get two different things. We get Antiochus Epiphanes. So Antiochus Epiphanes, he lived from 215 to 164 BC. So just about a couple hundred years before Christ. And he was the son of Antiochus the Great, the third. He's Antiochus the fourth. And these were Seleucid kings. And in Daniel, you read of the kings of the north. And so you've got the Seleucids in the north, and you have the Ptolemies in the south. And if you really are interested in this stuff, you ought to go check the message I did on Daniel 11. I put in tons of pictures and all these maps and showed the different conquests and the lands that were conquered by each side back and forth. And we just followed the Bible, and I had my map. I spent a lot of time on that map, so if you get a chance, go appreciate it. But that said, he came into Jerusalem. He slaughtered a pig in the temple. He put up a statue of Jupiter. Which is Zeus, Jupiter, Roman or Greek version, right? And they did horrible things. I'm trying to remember them all off the top of my head, but I mean, it was things like he would like get giant frying pans and fry people alive. And if he found that a mother had circumcised her son, he would hang the child, in front of the mother, execute the child, then execute the mother afterwards. But the point was that he was trying to eliminate Judaism. He wanted to exterminate it. And thank the Lord for the Hebrew hammer, Judas Maccabeus. Maccabee means hammer. And so he came in and they fought back, and there's some great stories, really cool stories. There's one of them where one of Judas's brothers, he had a few brothers. They were all these sons, and they had his godly father. And it was just a really cool story. It's really great history if you get a chance to learn about those guys. I mean, it's the stuff they really should make some good movies about. I don't know why there's not an amazing movie. And one of my stories that you're just going to learn about because you're stuck and I'm here, you can get off if you want. But I remember it was when the Maccabees, they were always outnumbered, and they won all these battles when they were greatly outnumbered by it's like Braveheart. There's these trained armies, and then there's these ragtag group of farmers and guys who came to fight, but they were fighting for their lives and fighting for their freedom and fighting for their God. They were zealous. Really, it's them who lived on the kind of the birth of the zealots. And there is the part, good point, Robert. They don't make movies because they make them heroes, and everyone likes to make them the bad guy these days. But they were fighting elephants. And I want to say it was Jason. It was one of the brothers of Judas Maccabeus, where there's these elephants, and they're afraid. I mean, elephants were like the tanks, right? I mean, what can you do to stop us thinking elephant? And the people were afraid. So one of the Maccabee brothers, he runs out there. They're not really named Maccabee, that's just Judas's nickname, but he runs out there with his spear. He charges the field solo and goes and gets under the elephant and thrusts his spear right through the chest of the elephant, killing the elephant and crushing and killing himself. But in that sacrifice, it's like the movie Predator. If it bleeds, it can die, right? No, he showed that the elephants are not invincible. And the people had this encouragement, though he gave his life. So many cool stories. And it's those guys, rabbit trail after rabbit trail, who fought off Antiochus Epiphanes, or Antiochus the Fourth of the Seleucid Empire. But in Daniel 11, as you move forward, you start seeing in verse 40, at the time of the end. And so you're going to find that this transitions to an end time. You'll see in Daniel 11, it says, the king shall do according to his will. Verse 36, he shall exalt and magnify himself above every god and speak blasphemies against the God of gods. And so there's this whole thing where he's going to break the covenant. He's going to magnify himself as God. He's going to put up his own image and see Jesus. Therefore, when you see, it's undeniable that Antiochus Epiphanes was a type. And he fit it. I mean, he fits the mold of the prophecy, yet Jesus Christ speaks of a future event. And so I think Daniel 12, there's one last verse from Daniel. Let's see here. Daniel 12. Flip. Oh, no, don't flip the page. Oh, yes, flip the page. Where am I going? Daniel 12. Oh, 11. Oh, yeah. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. Now, what we're going to find, and I'm not going to explain them all today because it's just a time thing, and I've taught Daniel, so you can go listen to Daniel if you want Daniel. But is that you see in Revelation 1,260 days. Here's 1,290 days. Now, 1,260 days is exactly 1/2 of 7 years when you're going off the 360-day prophetic calendar. And so Jesus speaks of this future event. If you want to hear how the movie plays out in my mind, and I taught this when we all went through Revelation, if you were listening and following along back when we did that, it talks about in Revelation 11 these two witnesses. And we read that the beast makes war against them and overcomes them, and it's right at this 1,260-day mark. My belief, again, this is totally just off of, I could see it playing out this way. This is not like here's a scriptural defense for the hill I want to die on. These guys are tormenting the earth. Well, the two witnesses are preaching against the Antichrist. The earth is being tormented. Here's where the tie is. And I think in many ways, the Antichrist is going to try and pin the plagues and the seal judgments and whatnot on these two witnesses and try and turn the world against them. And I do think at one point, I don't know, I've had these cool visions in my mind of like, he shows up and he's going to now go confront them. Maybe he's got his goon squad with him. And they call down fire, which is what they do. And as the fire comes down, and you got the Antichrist shielding himself from the fire, well, the Bible talks about him having damage to his arm and to his face. And everyone else dies. But he miraculously survives. And we read about a wound that should have killed the Antichrist, and yet miraculously he survives this. And where no one else has been able to touch them, at this point, however he does it, pop, pop, the Antichrist succeeds in killing the two witnesses. And they're in Jerusalem, so I'm just imagining he does that and, drops his gun, his mic drop, and he walks right on into the temple and begins to demand being worshipped. He is the one who put an end to those two. He is the one, the timing lines up that they get killed right at the same time he breaks the covenant and demands his worship in the temple. So again, it's kind of a Hollywood version, but not so Hollywood. I'm not trying to add a bunch of junk that isn't in the Bible. I'm just seeing if these events all played out in such a way. So he gets permanently scarred, his hand, his face, from shielding this fire. Again, this is totally putting a few verses together as a maybe. I just emphasize the maybe because I don't like to act like I understand this is the way it's going to be with some of these end times things where I want to say what we know and then say what is good and possible. But you'll find too that the mark of the beast is on the hand, it's on the face, right? It's interesting that those same places where he will be injured is the same places where people will show their allegiance and be marked, however, right? So, Abomination of Desolation. There is a past event, Antiochus Epiphanes. There's a future event with the Antichrist. And Jesus just tells them, at this point, you flee. And I think this is going to be the eye-opener. The Jews love this guy. That's really it. I think he's the one who opens the door for them to build their temple. He's well-loved. But as soon as the Jews see him go into the temple and want himself to be worshipped, that basically converts the rest of practicing Judaism, like light bulb. And they know it's time to flee. They flee into Petra. They flee down to Basra, this area of Edom or modern day Jordan. Isaiah 16 has some of the stuff that alludes to them going down that section. In fact, we taught this on Isaiah just recently, where God even asked Edom, like there was a time in history in Isaiah 16 where Israel came to Edom's help. And then God actually asked them, and then one day I'm going to need you to come to their help. And so, kind of cool stuff. And so he's just saying, you got to flee. When this thing happens, he's going to start coming out like a flood. So you need to go. And actually, it talks about him coming like a flood in Revelation. So we read about that in Revelation 12. Now, it mentions the Great Tribulation, verse 21. At the second half begins this Great Tribulation. And I think I got to verse 22 where it says, and unless those days were shortened, no flesh should be saved, but for the elect's sake, those days will be shortened. Man, I've got a whole bunch of references here. I'm not even going to flip to Isaiah 45:4, Isaiah 65:9, Psalm 105:43, 1 Chronicles 16:3. I've got a whole bunch of different references. Oh, maybe it's about the elect being Israel. I think Israel being God's elect. So it's just saying that if the time of the Great Tribulation, the amount of man on man war and persecution and supernatural wrath of God, if you combine those two things together, humanity would have been wiped out if God did not show up and put an end to it all, which we see Christ coming in Revelation 19 on his white horse to put an end to all of this. And so he wraps up this section. I'm going to see if I can get down to 28. That if anyone says to you, look, here is the Christ, or there, do not believe it. For false Christs and false prophets will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. I can never, these Matthew 24 is just going to be a long section. In Second Thessalonians chapter 2, it says the coming of the lawless one, 2 Thessalonians 2:9, is according to the working of Satan with all power, signs, and lying wonders. This is the short mini teaching. I know you all already know this, but maybe you have a friend who needs to hear it again. Signs and wonders do not authenticate something being from God. God has used signs and wonders to authenticate things. I'm not saying he's never done it, but it does not seal the deal. And oftentimes there are people or even churches that seem to emphasize if you have signs and wonders, that must be where it's at, right? That's the cat's meow right there. That is the real deal. But Jesus says that many false Christs are going to come with signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. And so it's just mentioning that as he's talking about the Antichrist coming in verses 15, he's describing this event that's going to come. Well, backing up now to the time of the disciples all the way up to the end times, just know that there's going to be a lot of false Christs. And here's something maybe I'll throw out for you. And maybe, I don't know what, Robert, I don't know how your comment sparked this thought, but it did somehow. Holy Spirit thing. People today are often making claims on who the Antichrist is or is going to be. John, in his epistle, mentions many antichrists. Many people are going to be types of the Antichrist or have a spirit of Antichrist. But Jesus basically says, it's not your problem to worry about who the Antichrist is or is going to be. The church is going to be gone. And the Jews have one thing to watch for and one only. I think by the time you can guess the church is raptured and some guy is helping rebuild the temple, maybe you can lay your bets on the table. But they're to watch for the abomination of desolation. No other signs are really the things we're looking for the Antichrist. So we don't need to sit there worrying, is this guy that guy's the Antichrist? The Pope's the Antichrist. Trump's the Antichrist. Biden's the Antichrist. This is the Antichrist. Church, you look up, your redemption draws near. Jews, watch the temple. When the temple comes and some dude walks up on in there, wants to build a little statue, and have himself receive worship, time to run. Head east and south. So, see, I've told you beforehand. Verse 25. Jesus gave us plenty of warning, so if we read our Bibles, we shouldn't have to worry about this stuff. Therefore, if they say to you, look, he's in the desert, don't go out. If he says, look, he's in the inner rooms, don't believe it. If they say he came down invisible to Brooklyn, don't believe them. For as lightning comes from the east and flashes the west, so also will the coming of the Son of Man be. When it happens, it's going to happen fast. For wherever the carcass is, there the eagles will be gathered together. That's one of those fun verses that I've studied and taught, and then I've studied again. I've taught it maybe slightly differently, and I come back and again, and boom, 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 boom. Here's the idea in short. People talk about eagles versus vultures. What's the right word? This and that. At the end of the day, though, what Jesus is just kind of saying is, here's a common understanding. Here's the obvious sign. When you see these birds flying around, and I know eagles aren't really carry-on birds, so there's a debatable thing there, but I think the simplest, straightforward thought, if I'm just taking this at plain value, when you're in the desert and you see a bunch of these birds circling around one location, you can assume what's over there, a carcass. When you are in the end times and you see the Abomination of Desolation, you should have a good assumption of what's going on. And so he's saying the sign will be obvious when the signs come. Until then, hold fast, keep doing what you're doing, and in love, some people create a straw man argument and say that the belief in the pre-tribulational rapture is escapism and that, this and that. Well, people who believe in the rapture are just going to sit back fat and happy because we're not going to be here. Yes, dumb Christians might do that. Bad Christians might do that. False converts might do that. But anyone who's born again, who has a heart at all for the Lord, and believes in the pre-tribulational rapture, we know that our time is short. It's daytime, thus we work. But the night is coming in which no man will be able to work, right? And so we work. Our friends, we only have so much time to reach them. Heavenly reward, we have only so much time to earn it. And I'll be honest, I love understanding the end times. I love understanding the Bible, which speaks a lot about the end times. But when I'm in the text, I focus on it. And as soon as we move past that, I'm done. I don't sit there focusing on prophecy and end times all the time because I'm focusing on just what has Jesus called me to do. Make disciples, teach the Bible, fellowship, pray, those basic things. And so honestly, I think the people who have the best understanding of the end times, well, they know what they need to know, and then they go back and they get to work. And so that's for you guys too. It's exciting and fun to learn about, but at the end of the day, get to work. Share the gospel. Do something out of the ordinary for yourself today. If you listen to yesterday morning, unless you're uncomfortable or it's inconvenient, not practical. Yeah, serving the Lord is never any of those things, but it's worth it. And it's what obedience looks like. So God bless you guys. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning, bright and early, as we continue the Olivet Discourse. Ooh, hot coffee, good. Share if you care.